Hello guys, and welcome to another one with me, Eldrin from Lodge to Lumiere. This is chapter 2 of our production pipelines training series, and in this I'm covering Cinema 4D to A, and I'm also covering production pipelines. So what I intend to do at the finale of this tutorial is I'd like to get Testa animated using the Lumiere rig tools and some mocap. And we're going to do all of this without even using Motion Builder. So we're going to be able to use the tools plus a few techniques in Cinema and actually directly get motion capture onto her without even needing to leave the program. Which is going to be an amazing thing. We're also going to cover Arnold and some of the abilities it has to really accelerate your pipeline and really make everything efficient. So definitely going to be covering things like using Arnold's command line renderer to be able to render out a whole bunch of sequences in batch, which is going to allow you to be able to split your sequence up on multiple computers and get things rendered a lot faster. So it's going to be kind of sort of like a dirty render farming kind of sort of thing, which honestly is how I do a lot of my render farming. I do have Deadline and I have Muster as well, and I use those occasionally to do render farming in a more professional type manner. But oftentimes I'm, just trying to get the work out to the client, and just to expedite things, I'll send stuff out via Arnold's scene source files. And I'll just copy it manually over the network to multiple computers in my house, and I'll just render them all out in a kind of sort of dirty kind of sort of way. It gives me a lot more functional control sometimes than Deadline and Muster can, without all the setup and all the kind of sort of jerry-rigging I have to do there. But it does require that you be very, very careful with your naming conventions and your organization. And so that's what I'm going to cover right now. So here we have Testa2's directory, and we've been in here a number of times in a bunch of different tutorials. Obviously, some of these you'll probably remember. The advanced exporting is for doing the hair. Lumiere rig tools, I just did a tutorial on that just a few days ago. We did some stuff with her with mocap using a motion builder. We have a few renders of her. Actually just one render, and this is from Maxwell. It's just a quick dirty render with me testing Maxwell out. Haven't done any tutorials on Maxwell yet. I may do a few. Maxwell is a pretty awesome renderer in and of itself, and it's just like Arnold. It's completely physically accurate, a joy to work with, but its speed and the iterative process of it leaves a little bit to be desired compared to Arnold, but it's just as capable. And yeah, we've done a few other things, but the master folder, so this is the folder that if I'm working on an asset, the master folder will be the master asset. So this folder contains a directory for every file format / program that I'll use to create the asset. So if I do something for her in Maya, for instance, like maybe I'm doing some clothing animation. I'm still working on that Qualcloth tutorial and some Marvelous Designer stuff. I've been doing Qualcloth in Maya, so I kind of have a Maya folder for her to like bring things back and forth. FBX. We've obviously used this folder to do a couple of animation transfers between Motion Builder and Cinema. Face Shift to do some facial animation stuff. Daz is where her original character came from, so we've got that just in case we want to go back and tweak the original. We've got some reference materials here, which I'm using as a reference to get some ideas on how to make the clothes. MDD format is there just in case I was to export out of Marvelous Designer, but the new Marvelous Designer has some new ways to export, so that's going to be pretty fun to discuss a little bit later as well. And then the Cinema 4D folder actually has some of our main assets. and that's because that's my program of choice. So since it's my digital content creation program of choice, it's the one that has the most assets, and this is the one that drives every single other program. So like I said, what I'll do is I'll create a folder for each individual type of asset that I need. We're also going to create a folder for Arnold here because we may need to export some Arnold stuff out potentially to use in other scenes and different things. I also like to go with a lowercase naming scheme, and this has a lot to do with the fact that I use Linux and I use Mac OS X. So a lot of my naming convention things that I do are just to make it easier for me to be able to access things on the terminal, which is going to be important for us a little bit later because Kick is used on the terminal, or in case of Windows, it's used on the command line. And sometimes you want to have an easy way to be able to get at certain assets, and this way your naming conventions will allow you to easily be able to type things out and not have to worry about uppercase and lowercase letters. The other thing is your path. It's very important when you're rendering in certain render engines or you're rendering in certain programs that your path doesn't contain any spaces, and this path has no spaces. All the way from the root all the way up to her main folder, it has no spaces. It would be preferable to actually make her a lowercase t as well, but I'm not going to sweat that so much in this particular case. But everything should be lowercase, or not lowercase, but everything should be no spaces. And if you need a space, that's where these underscores come into play. So underscores and lowercase are very important in a production pipeline because it's going to allow you to quickly be able to write scripts or be able to use tools like Shotgun and tools at certain other studios are driven on that kind of sort of concept of things being named in a clean way. Some of the other things I do is, now that I have assets that are rendered with multiple different renderers, I like to name my main asset underscore Arnold, so that I know that this is the main Arnold asset, whereas this asset with no underscore behind it is just the natural Cinema 4D asset. And we're going to load her right now. So that's what I like to do as far as my naming convention for my assets are, especially when it comes to other rendering engines. Alright, as far as textures are concerned, we're going to want to rename her textures eventually, and we're going to do that when we get into the Arnold workflow right now. So here we are, and we have our testa asset, and actually I'm not going to use this one only because we happen to have a better one. We have a version of Testa that actually used the Lumiere rig tools, so this version is going to be easier for us to animate in our next chapter. So we can go ahead and use her, and I've just done a little bit of, we did a little bit of posing, I believe, in the last tutorial. Let's go ahead and PSR reset her to get everything kind of sort of back to square one here. Okay, so she's ready to go, and we're going to go ahead and save this as our master Arnold asset, like so, replacing the current one that's there. Alright, so we have C4D to A here, and right now we could run the IPR and we could render in Arnold, actually let's go ahead and save, and why don't we go ahead and do that. So one of the first things you'll notice is, of course, that we have an IPR and a window comes up over here. Now, what's happening right now is Arnold is actually rendering in the background, and it's showing us a real-time preview of what our scene looks like at render time. So this preview is a real-time view at whatever sampler settings that you have set. It is a real-time preview of, well, not a real-time preview, but semi-real-time preview of exactly what your scene is going to look. And so what you see is what you get, kind of sort of deal. So there's no smoke and mirrors here. And right now, basically, if we were to render the scene out, we would actually see nothing. And the reason for that is, of course, it's the same as it is in Maya. You need a light in the scene in order to be able to render in Arnold. So what I like to do is I like to drop a Arnold Sky into my scene. And if we come back over here and we move, you'll notice something that's really incredible right away in Arnold. Not only is this a real-time preview of your character, but it's an interactive preview that is incredibly fast. And I dare say this might be the fastest implementation of the interactive preview render of Arnold to date. As you guys saw in my tutorial with the Maya one, I mean, when it's rendering, it kind of it's very sluggish, and you can't really move too much, and it's just really kills, you know, my ability to kind of sort of, I mean, it's great, it is interactive, kind of sort of, and it is still incredible compared to anything else that I had at the time, but this blows everything out of the water. Like right away, this real-time feedback of what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing in my scene just makes everything so much easier. For instance, with Testa's hair, I've been able to style hair in Cinema 4D with incredible ease. You can come in here and you can select your brush, and you can select the hair, and you can start to brush the hair, and right away you immediately see all the results of your brush movements directly in the viewport, exceptionally fast. And Arnold renders hair using a spline primitive. It's unlike Cinema's renderer, standard renderer. Arnold has a true actual spline primitive that will render splines. So that opens up a lot of possibilities, motion graphics wise as well. You can render, you can do things with splines, and you don't even have to actually make geometry, which is awesome. But yeah, this is completely revolutionized my workflow, because before this I would, you know, you have to do so much iterations with Cinema 4D's hair system to get the look, and you know, if you just make like a single change to the hair material and you just do like one little wrong tweak in that material, all of a sudden you're working against yourself, and you don't know exactly what you're getting out of your hair system, and it's just so difficult. It's so difficult, in fact, that, you know, I just, for a while, I kind of just absolved myself of hair. It was very difficult to even do hair in Cinema 4D. But now it's very viable, and it's very possible to get some really amazing looks. Alright, so, you know, there's that, the interactive render preview. The Arnold Sky is one of those things that, as the beta team kind of sort of progressed over the last couple of months, we kind of got the Arnold guys to, you know, give us some really cool concessions as far as some functionality. So the Arnold Sky is a sky dome light, just like the Cinema 4D Sky. kind of sort of is. So if you go to create, if you go here actually, and you go to sky, so you can create a sky, and if you were to turn on global illumination as an effect here in Cinema, you could get a similar result if you were to apply apply an image to the sky object. You would get kind of sort of a global illuminated scene. As you can see in Arnold, you get all of that by default. Ambient occlusion, global illumination already exists. Right now the Arnold Sky is rendering out a white sky. And if we were to change the color of this to like a sky blue, you'll see that she has color bleeding. You'll see that it renders incredibly fast. And we've got very accurate color bleeding and illumination here. If we were to bring in a sphere and we were to quickly shade it with a red color, you'll also notice that Arnold has incredible color bleed built into it as well. So let's go to create, and we're going to create a Arnold surface, and we're going to create a, not an AL surface, but we'll create a standard Arnold material, and we'll place it on that sphere. And we're going to get into how to shade things with Arnold in just a few moments, but for now we've got this Arnold standard material, and we've got this nice view of the different controls that we have available for this material. And so we can come in and we can change our color to some obnoxious brightly saturated red, and you'll notice immediately right away, and if you saw in its lower progressive state, you'll notice that the red is bleeding over into her. So because there's multiple bounces, and because this is a global illumination kind of sort of deal, you get color bleed from objects in the scene very, very realistically, just like in the real world. Alright, now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and turn off her hair temporarily, because we don't want to deal with that yet. I will be coming back to that in a later tutorial. But what we want to do is let's go ahead and grab a nice sky really quick. I believe I have one actually already in this scene, or already in this this file structure here. So what we're going to do actually here is we're going to come to the Arnold Sky, and we're going to go under background sky, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the color here, and we're going to click on this disclosure triangle, not this one. This one's going to bring up the color picker. It's going to bring up the format of the well, it's not going to bring up the format, it just brings up the color picker. But if we click on this one will bring up the value type, and we can change it from a constant color to something like a link or a texture. A link is going to actually allow us to be able to use a shader, an Arnold shader, as the actual color for the sky, which is an incredible thing. But if we go ahead and use a texture, we can actually go ahead and select a image to use as our color. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our documents, and we're going to grab Testa 2, and we're going to grab the master, we're going to grab C4D, texture. Let's see if I have a texture in here. Okay, so I have one texture in here. Let's see what we've got. So this is kind of a dome scene that I've been using of late to test out custom characters that I've been doing for certain projects. It's just a really nice scene that's got some really nice lights overhead, and it just gives us a really clean look to work with, some nice natural lighting. It's a lat long image, as in it's stretched in the at the poles. It's stretched in a panoramic type way. We're Right now the intensity of the actual global illumination, the HDRI, is set to 1. And so if we want to increase the light in the scene, we could mess with the intensity of the image, which is not typically how I like to increase the light in the scene. But as you can see, we are getting more light in the scene, and this is a really good way to actually adjust the exposure of the image itself. Since this is a 32-bit HDRI, it has a lot of light information, and so we can decrease the intensity of it or increase the intensity of it, and we can get a lot more light information out of the image if we want. But I prefer typically to change the sky dome light itself. So our image, our HDRI here, if we go and hunt it down under Test2's master folder, and that's going to load up Photoshop for us. Our image right now is 8192 by 4096. So in Arnold, if you're using an Arnold Sky, the resolution should be the largest dimension of the image that you're actually loading up. So 8192 is going to be our resolution, and that's just going to give us a much more accurate sampling of our actual image. The samples is going to allow us to clear some noise out of the shadows and out of the lighting of the character itself. And we also set our intensity back to 1, but the scene hadn't quite refreshed yet, and so now it's refreshed. And what I like to do to actually increase the lighting is under the light, the sky dome light itself, I like to mess with the exposure because it's a more accurate f-stop light control, a photographer type control. And so with this, every single increase in exposure actually doubles the light of the scene, like a real camera when you change the f-stop. And so with this, we can go ahead and actually increase our light, and this is the way I like to work, mostly because it's kind of sort of like a little bit of a recommended Arnold workflow of sorts. And then once again, we can increase the sampling of our lights as well. And that's going to take care of a little bit of noise. So I like to just increase that to like 4 to kind of sort of clean things up a little bit. And then everything else is pretty much good, and that's just going to give you like a really good kind of sort of look there. Now, this exposure is not going to actually increase the overall lighting of the background itself. You would do that from the background. And increasing the background does also increase the lighting of the scene as well. So that is kind of a good way to increase both at the same time if that's what you need to do. But if you just need to increase the amount of light shining on the characters themselves, the exposure is a really good way to do it in the sky dome light. So, alright. But that's the sky dome light. You've also got some standard lights here as well in Arnold. And we're going to let Arnold refresh for a couple of seconds. So sometimes you just want to give C4D2A a couple of moments to just kind of sort of refresh itself and get its bearings as far as what you've done. And okay, so it's refreshed, and I've actually added a Arnold light into the scene as well. So the Arnold light, which is located right here or under your plugins right here, it's the first option. It's just a simple light. And one of the things I don't like about the implementation of C4D2A right off the bat is the light that you get right out the box is actually not really a physically accurate light. This is an Omni light, and it has no kind of sort of it bounces in all, it goes in all directions, and it's not necessarily a truly realistic type of light. I typically like to have my lights have area and different things like that, so that they simulate more realistically the way lights kind of sort of are in real life. So you can come into your light settings here. Instead of using a point light, you can change it to the default light that C4 or M2A, Maya to Arnold, would use, which would be like a quad light. Quad light's going to give you a much more realistic fall off. It's going to give you an area as well that you can work with your light. And so if you're looking for more of a point light type look, you might shrink the area, and if you're looking for more of a diffuse type light look, you increase the area. All lights by default in Arnold also have quadratic fall off, which is very physically accurate. It's how lights work in the real world. And so the further light moves away, the less light gets lit on the subject. I almost always use the Arnold Sky, mostly because Arnold does an extremely good job. It's one of the best renderers on the market as far as really, really good image-based lighting. The characters just look a little bit more realistic when you're using a light like that. The Arnold lights themselves are very good as well, but I use them more often when I'm doing indoor scenes or when I'm just trying to get like a highlight on my character a little bit. So let me turn off the render dots for this Arnold light and let Arnold refresh itself here real quick. Excellent. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it quits for this currently. In the next tutorial we'll continue this lesson, and we'll get more into how we're going to go about actually shading Testa herself. So see you guys there.